Hi, this is James. In this video, I'm continuing sharing about my personal study and practice of cartomancy using playing cards. If this is your first time here, I'd like to say welcome, and if you're returning, I'd like to say welcome back. For those of you who are here for the first time, I will be leaving links to the previous installments of this video series in the description box below if you feel like you want to check those out. Over the course of the last few installments, I've been talking about the meanings that I have for the playing cards, and in the last installment specifically, I talked about the number 6 cards. So I talked about the energy and theme that I have around the number 6 and how it plays into the 6 cards, and then I shared my meanings for each of them. And in this video, we're going to pick right up where we left off, so now we're moving from the number 6 to the number 7. So in the next segment, I'll be talking about the energy and theme that I have around the number 7 and how it plays into the 7 cards. And then following that, I'll be talking about all the meanings that I have for each of the 7 cards. The deck that has been assisting me throughout this video series has been the Tally-Ho playing cards, specifically number 13 in the series. And the reason why I like this particular deck so much is that it was designed by Jackson Robinson of King's Wild Project. So now that I've done a little bit of intro and I talked about the deck that's going to be assisting me in this video, let's now move on to the next segment where I'll be talking more about the energy and theme around the number 7. And here we are with all the 7 cards in the deck. And for me, my go-to energy or theme associated with the 7 are 2 things. Number 1, I think of spirituality, and number 2, improvement. So spirituality and improvement are the themes that I usually go to first with the number 7. Along the lines of spirituality, for me the number 7 can represent the metaphysical and the occult and anything psychic related. I have been educated in psychology. I have a psychology background. So for me personally, the number 7 represents psychology, and along those lines, self-awareness or insight. And then my last personal meaning for the number 7 is that it can represent solitude. Now there are a number of associations connected to the number 7, so I will share some of mine. So some of those are Lucky 7, 7th Heaven, 7 days in a week, the 7 chakras, and the chakras are the energy centers in the body. If you are spiritually minded or metaphysically minded, you will probably know that the number 7 is mentioned a number of times in the Bible. And so some of the associations I have with the Bible in mind are 7 fat cows and 7 lean cows, 7 good ears of corn and 7 withered ones. And this comes from the episode in the Bible where Pharaoh was telling Joseph his dream for interpretation, and the underlying meaning of the dream was that it represented 7 years of prosperity and 7 years of famine. Now in the book of Revelation, again we have the 7 mentioned a number of ways. So the symbolism in Revelation was connected to 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 stars, 7 lamps, 7 angels, 7 thunders, and 7 trumpets. Now, aside from the Bible, some other associations connected to the number 7 are 7 wonders of the world, the 7 seas, the 7 dwarfs from Snow White and the 7 dwarfs, the 7-year itch, 7 Up, and that would be the beverage, 7 virtues, and conversely, 7 deadly sins. And then the last one I have is 24/7, meaning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And those are my meanings and associations for the number 7. And so now let's move into the next segment where we'll start taking a look at the individual cards, starting with the 7 of Hearts. First up, we have the 7 of Hearts. And so my go-to meanings for this card when it turns up in a reading are surprise, and because the Hearts is a red suit, it's usually a pleasant surprise, and also a repeated occurrence, meaning like something that happens more than once or repeatedly. For me, the 7 of Hearts can also represent the second time around or second chances. Keeping with the idea that the suit of hearts for me can represent healing, and the number 7 is spirituality, the 7 of Hearts can represent spiritual healing. And also because hearts can represent feelings, emotions, and relationships, and again, with the number 7 being spirituality, this can represent a spiritual relationship or a spiritual partnership. Because the number 7 can represent improvement, the 7 of Hearts for me can also represent improvement in a relationship. And again, playing on the improvement aspect of the number 7, the 7 of Hearts generally can represent change for the better. And then the last meaning that I have for the 7 of Hearts is that it can represent a love for the spiritual, the mystical, and the metaphysical. And so now let's move on to the next 7 card, the 7 of Clubs. And here we are with the next card, the 7 of Clubs. And so for me, the 7 of Clubs can represent hard work or working very hard, and that's because the suit of Clubs can represent work. This could be a time, if this card turns up in a reading, where you have to put your nose to the grindstone. And again, that's just another way of saying there's going to be a lot of work or effort being put into the situation. Now, on the challenging side of the working aspect of the clubs, the 7 of Clubs can represent being a workaholic. And keeping with the more challenging aspects of this card, the 7 of Clubs can also represent small difficulties and an argument. Now, because the number 7 can represent spirituality, I tend to look at this card as representing spiritual work or spiritual business or a spiritual service. So spiritual work, business, or service. And playing on the improvement aspect of the 7, this card can also represent improvement, but the rub here is that it will take work or effort because of the clubs aspect of the card. The 7 of Clubs can represent weighing the pros and the cons. So if you have a decision you need to make and this card shows up in the reading, it represents weighing the pros and the cons, taking a look at what could be potentially good in the situation and what might be potentially challenging. And I mentioned the workaholic aspect of this card earlier, and keeping with that, the 7 of Clubs, when it comes up in reference to working too much, the advice being offered here is that there's a need to relax. And the last thing that I want to say about the 7 of Clubs is that from a very general standpoint, the 7 of Clubs can represent making the best of a difficult situation. And so now let's move on to the third 7 card, the 7 of Diamonds. And here we are with our third card, the 7 of Diamonds. And for me, my go-to meaning for this card when it turns up in a reading is investment. And with that, it represents getting a return on that investment. Now, because diamonds can represent money and finances, this could represent a financial investment and therefore a financial return. But if the context or the question has nothing to do with money, I tend to go with a meaning that represents an investment of time, energy, and resources. Now, because the number 7 can represent all things spiritual, I tend to read the 7 of Diamonds as spiritual energy. And bringing this back to the financial aspect of the suit of diamonds, the 7 of Diamonds can represent stocks, bonds, and savings. Now, because the number 7 can represent improvement, the 7 of Diamonds for me can represent financial improvement. The 7 of Diamonds going along with the idea of a return on investment of time, energy, and resources can represent reaping a harvest. And with the 7 being spiritual, or the spirituality aspect of the card, it can represent along the lines of harvest the idea of sowing and reaping, which is a universal or spiritual law. And then the last thing that I want to say about the 7 of Diamonds is that this is also known as the gamble card. And with that, the 7 of Diamonds can represent all kinds of speculation. And so now let's move on to our final 7 card for this video, the 7 of Spades. And here we are with our final card for this video installment, the 7 of Spades. Because the suit of spades for me can represent problems, challenges, difficulties, blocks, and obstacles, my first go-to meaning for this card when it turns up in a reading is that it can represent a setback or some kind of stagnation. Going with the idea of stagnation, the 7 of Spades can represent a need to learn patience because you are at some kind of standstill. Now, because the number 7 represents improvement, but the suit of spades can represent difficulties, one of my meanings for this card is difficulty improving a situation. Now, because the number 7 can represent all things spiritual, for me this card can represent a spiritual challenge or crisis. And the underlying advice is that there's a need to have faith. This is a faith card. The 7 of Spades can also represent medication. So if you're doing a reading on a health-related topic or matter, and this card turns up, it can represent medication. Now, going with the idea that the number 7 can represent psychology and self-awareness and personal insight, the 7 of Spades in a challenging sense can represent any kind of addiction or a habit. So I link those two things with the 7 of Spades. Again, keeping with the challenging aspect of the suit of spades, the 7 of Spades can also represent frustration and unhappiness. And then the last thing that I want to say about the 7 of Spades is that it can represent the unexpected. And that will round out our look at each of the 7 cards. And there you have it. We talked about the number 7 and the themes and associations I have for it, and the meanings I have and use for all the 7 cards. And that will bring this video installment of the series to a close. In the next installment, we'll take a look at the number 8 and all the 8 cards. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and I'd like to thank you for sharing this space with me, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video together. So until then, I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.